Okay. So, the climate change context and precepts of sustainable design. Is the volume okay? Hear me okay? Thank you. So, I think this is a very important lecture because it sets out the context for sustainable design. And these are the contents of the lecture. Okay, this is what we'll go through. So let's start with the IPCC, and this stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So this is an international panel established by multiple governments around the world to study and to report back on climate change. And the results and the recommendations from the IPCC are agreed internationally. So it's a hugely important panel. And they have working groups and they have a task force, again, internationally, to study climate change. So, the Working Group 1 assesses the physical, scientific aspects of the climate system and climate change. The main topics assessed include changes in greenhouse gases and aerosols in the atmosphere, changes in the air, land and ocean temperatures, changes in rainfall, glaciers, ice sheets, oceans and sea level, historical and paleoclimatic perspective on climate change, biogeochemistry, carbon cycle, gases, aerosols, satellite data, climate models, climate projections, causes and attribution of climate change. So, hugely important working group, looking internationally at all of the kind of observed changes in terms of climate change. The Working Group 2 is assessing the vulnerability of socio-economic and natural systems to climate change, negative and positive consequences of climate change, and the options for adapting to it. So, an important distinction. Working Group 1 is looking at the scientific data of the planet. Working Group 2 is looking at the consequences. And so by socio-economic, they're looking at the consequences of climate change for the human population on the planet. Okay. Working Group 3 assesses the options for mitigating climate change through limiting or preventing, greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing activities that remove them from the atmosphere. Okay, the Task Force on National Greenhouse Gas Inventories was established by the IPCC to oversee the National Greenhouse Gas Inventories Programme. So GHG, greenhouse gases, are hugely important in terms of climate change. Now I'm going to move on shortly into some of the results of the IPCC, specifically Working Group 1. Now the documents I'll show in this lecture are all downloadable, so you can have a look at them yourself. The thing to bear in mind is that the full document contains a huge amount of scientific information. And I think what you need to look for is what's more relevant to you as a designer. So what I've done in this lecture is extract the more kind of relevant information. So let's look now at some of the evidence for climate change. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at global warming. So we have dates along the bottom, and we have recorded decadal average, so the average recorded temperatures for those decades. And as you can see, each of the previous 3 decades has been successively warmer at the Earth's surface. And in the Northern Hemisphere, in the past 30 years, this has been the warmest period in the last 1,400 years. Okay, so the science, the data collected is showing significant evidence for global warming. And then when you look at that on a global trend, here we have a colour system used to signify global warming. So we go from the sort of pale blue showing no warming through to the magenta showing a global warming of 2.5 degrees Celsius. And the evidence is unequivocal that the planet is warming. Okay? There have been, people have commented over the past 10 years about there's no evidence for global warming, it's just a pattern. But the IPCC are very strongly in favour of that the evidence supports global warming. Okay, so looking here at a slightly different set of data, here we're looking at the percentage increase, the temperature increase in degrees Celsius, and we're looking at this over not just the next few years, but the next sort of 90 years. And the evidence is showing that looking at the global warming, we are likely to see a global warming of anything between perhaps 1.5 degree up to perhaps 4 degrees Celsius over the planet. Now I'll explain in a moment about why we have the different predictions. Okay. And sorry about this warning message that keeps flashing up. Looking at that in terms of what that means in terms of global mean sea level, we are looking at a predicted sea level rise between about 0.5 meters, and 1 meter over the next 90 years. The reason we have these two different colours on the graph is because this is a prediction. We're looking at a sort of best and a worst case prediction. So the blue line is our sort of best case scenario, and that's based on a significant reduction in carbon emissions. The red one is a sort of worst case scenario based on an increased carbon emissions. So these are the reports from the IPCC. So they've issued a number of reports year by year, and they're constantly updated. The most recent one is the 2013 version. And if you simply Google IPCC, type that into your search engine, you can find these reports. These reports are being issued internationally to all governments, all scientists, all architects, all engineers. So it's freely accessible information. And yet there have been 209 lead authors, 50 editors from 39 countries. Over 600 contributing authors from 32 countries. So the important thing about the IPCC is that they are striving to make this a truly international document. That way it will have an international impact at a governmental level. If it was a document just produced by one country, there could be suspicions that that's not a sort of unbiased document. Okay. I'm going